Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Molly Nicolai, and I am ASAP's Executive Director. I really appreciate you making the time today to join us in this virtual format and hope that we can provide an overview of some opportunities and models for selling to schools in our region. So while I am now in the Executive Director role, I come to this presentation having worked in farm to school for more than 10 years and have really been looking at it from both the buyer and farmer end of things to make sure that we can try to work within existing systems to get more local food into the classroom. So thank you for joining us today. We also have Allison Francis, who's Child Nutrition Director with Haywood County Schools, joining us today, as well as Melinda Aponte and Jeannie Gunn to share their experience from the early childhood perspective. So thank you all for joining us today. So hopefully, if you have joined us here in this workshop today, you know a little bit about ASAP, but just as a reminder, we are a regional nonprofit serving Western North Carolina and the Southern Appalachians, and our mission is to help local farms thrive, to link farmers with markets and supporters, and to build healthy communities through connections to local food. So of course we have multiple program areas, but today this topic really falls squarely within our Growing Minds Farm to School program. So our Farm to School program provides training and technical assistance to school staff and parents, community members, and farmers to really try to make those connections for our children and families, as well as within those school systems. Growing Minds started as a school garden program back in 2004, and since then has expanded to really focus on broader positive experiences with local food and farms, looking at the classroom, the cafeteria, and the broader community. Since its inception, Growing Minds has been involved in a regional network of farm to school programs across the country. We were the Southeastern regional lead for 10 years, and we're currently co-facilitating the North Carolina Farm to Preschool Network. So understanding what the needs and challenges are in our own community, but also participating in the conversation on a broad scale to learn from other models as well. So I had mentioned before, our approach to farm to school is not strictly procurement or strictly education pieces, that a lot of our programming is designed around those cafeteria, classroom, and community connections. So really looking to make those pieces tie together to make the most impact in our communities. So today, I'm going to do a little bit of an overview of how school food works. And so I think that when we have farmers asking about selling to schools, it's kind of a loaded question, that there are so many different layers and details to understand, but wanting to give a broad overview of what that looks like at selling to K-12 schools, which is a very different model than selling to preschools or early childhood nutrition programs. So looking at that kind of those different systems and understanding the opportunities and challenges within both. So thank you again for Haywood County Schools and YWCA and Werner for joining us today to share some of their experience and offer that perspective. We're also going to try to be thinking about what are some questions that farmers need to ask themselves if they're considering selling to schools, but also what are the questions to ask buyers, that we know so much of this this work is about making connections and how do we foster good relationships and communications, and a big piece of that is knowing what questions to ask. So we also hope to share a few resources to take you beyond kind of this general overview, and hopefully have time to squeeze in for some question and answer as well. So we've got a kind of a two-part piece today. We've got this initial presentation workshop part of the program that we're going to try to wrap up in an hour, and then shift over to a grower buyer meeting. So if you haven't had a chance yet to register to meet with a buyer, please, take the opportunity to go and sign up for a time slot there, and we'll also have some other open rooms for broader discussion if needed. So we'll get into the details of how that works as we go along here. So quick general overview, and again, there's so many layers to school food systems that we can't dive into today, but wanting to kind of give you an overview of kind of some of those systems and how school food works. So in general, I think one thing that most folks do not realize about our public school systems is that child nutrition programs are expected to financially be self-supporting and operate as kind of an independent business within the school system. And the ongoing theme you'll hear today is that it depends. Every school system is slightly different. So there are some systems that will get some county level support or some additional support for their program. But in general, most of the school nutrition programs are set up as a self-supporting entity that they need to cover their costs of personnel salary and benefits, food, supplies, equipment, etc. Some situations, some school systems are also asked to pay in for the privilege of doing business at the school. So that's an additional cost on many folks. There are federal funds provide about half of the revenue for most school systems. Again, that's kind of generalization. We've got the National School Lunch Program and snack programs as well. But the K-12 system in particular, but this is true for early childhood as well, are about half of that is covered by federal support through free and reduced lunch programs. But there's additional revenue that school systems are really having to bring in as well. So some of you may be familiar with the National School Lunch Program, free and reduced lunch, but it's really helpful, I think, to be thinking about within these programs. We've got nutrition services that are looking at both K-12 schools. Here you can see the USDA School Lunch Program, and then the CACFP, which is the Child and Adult Care Food Program. And that is basically the school lunch program. That's the subsidy for reimbursement within the early childhood and also senior food programs. So as we talk about reimbursement rate, this is something to be thinking about, like as we look at costs and what can we realistically do within our program budgets. These programs are operating on, very restricted reimbursement rates to cover all their costs for meals. So one of the things to be aware of is kind of understanding the context and the budget constraints that folks are dealing with. So this kind of gives a little breakdown of what does that look like, for those reimbursement rates, what kind of percent, how is that broken out across the costs for school systems? So this is a helpful visual for me to kind of look at. A big chunk of that is labor, and that's true, whether you're a farmer or whether you're in food service. We know that labor costs are a huge, significant piece of the costs that we're having to look at within our budgets. Food and supplies, direct costs, of course, equipment is just a very tiny piece, and if there is any profit, it is generally put back into that program for new equipment and things there. That gives the flexibility if there are additional costs. And then, of course, there are requirements that to receive those federal reimbursements, that there needs to be specific components within that school lunch meal that's provided. So, of course, we've got milk, vegetable, fruit, grain, protein. So as we're talking about farm to school and understanding these systems, primarily we'll be talking about produce procurement here today. I was glad to see a few meat producers that had signed up, and that is certainly something that more and more systems are able to make happen, is to bring in some of the local meat into these meals. But primarily most of the folks that have had success with local procurement start with produce. So this gives you a sense that for a meal to be reimbursable under these federal programs, it needs to have these components. So as you're thinking about what's on the plate and where does local product fit in, most folks are looking at what is that vegetable or fruit, sometimes protein, that we could, bring in and feature a local product. So one of the things that I think is important to include and mention is that in addition to the challenges on the farmer end for selling into schools, sharing some of the barriers that buyers have communicated about that they're experiencing with local purchasing. So when we're doing surveys of local buyers, in particular school systems, we're saying, what is it that keeps you from buying local? And most people assume that is just budget alone. And usually, of course, it's more complicated than that. But it's often challenging to find the right volumes or the product variety, the communication, as with any buying and purchasing relationship, that communication is not an easy task. So that is a huge barrier for making these systems work. Inconsistencies, deliveries, logistics, of course, pricing is a piece of it, but also the right packaging and locating local product. So that's something that we've heard from presenters here today. Not just finding any local product, but products that fit the requirements and needs of that particular school system. So a lot of what I shared up until now has been talking specifically about K-12 schools. And I think it's helpful when you're looking at different market outlets to understand kind of what is the scale and volume and requirements when you're comparing, like, is a K-12 school system a good market outlet for me versus a preschool? And so, of course, looking at some of these comparisons across institutional markets is one opportunity to see where your farm or your business may fit. Of course, K-12 schools are going to serve a higher number of children. They've got more volume. There's more purchasing requirements and restrictions that they have to operate in. Most school systems, again, this is kind of a typical or average here. Most school systems in our region are going to be much smaller scale in terms of the number of children that are served, but I have a little bit more flexibility in terms of fewer restrictions, I should say, on some of those purchasing. But it's also, interesting if you're looking at K-12 or preschools as possible market outlets. Colleges and universities and hospitals is also something we've worked with in terms of looking at those institutional markets and opportunities for featuring local through that. So let's start with farm to school K-12, and wanted to break these out a little bit different so that we could compare and contrast some of the different market opportunities. Some of the opportunities in, why schools as a market outlet. Farm to school started because there was a market, there was a school in every community. And so very much a lot of those folks that are making this happen have that community connection and really looking closer to home for featuring product on our menus. Of course, market diversification is an important thing for any farm business plan that, most folks that are serving school systems, that's not the only thing they're doing. They may also be serving other wholesale markets or diversify or selling seconds to the institutional market and getting a higher premium with restaurants or other types of markets. So really looking at the opportunities within farm to school and selling to school systems as part of that diversification strategy.
Recording in progress.
Another reason that, the opportunity of connecting to schools is that connection to community and those cross-marketing opportunities to feature your product on the menu and be celebrating the local seasonality of the region is a great opportunity to promote your farm and other places that that children and their families can connect with your farm and farm business. And of course, there's also a lot of different options within a typical food service for featuring local. We of course think about school lunch as the standard, but also, one of the opportunities is thinking about what does this look like in the school year versus summer feeding programs. There's also a USDA fresh fruit and vegetable program that offers fresh snacks. So really be thinking creatively and talking with your child nutrition staff about what their needs are throughout the year, what may be challenges and opportunities during the school year, but maybe starting with some of these other program opportunities as well. So of course, as with opportunities, there's always challenges for any market, but I think one of the things that is really a sticking point for a lot of folks is thinking about the specific purchasing requirements. So, K-12 school systems have strict requirements for GAP certification and insurance, and you need to meet some very specific standards. And so being able to work within those requirements limits the number of farm businesses that are a good fit for those programs. Typically, you can see kind of from this diagram comparing different market price points across the community. Typically, school systems have the lowest price point, and that's not just true to school systems, but that institutional market in general. You're going to see high volumes of product moving through distributors and institutions, but also a low price point. So if your business model is one built on volume, it may be more of an opportunity than if you're doing specialty or direct sales. Seasonality is, of course, a challenge. That's one of the big questions that we get is, summer is when all the fresh product is coming in, how does that fit within a school menu cycle? So something that folks are navigating and looking for opportunities, in particular in those spring and fall shoulder seasons. How can we really highlight what farmers have available? And then, of course, what I had mentioned before, one of the other challenges is there's a lot of differences across systems. It may be that one county school system has a central warehouse and you would have one place to deliver to. Another school system may need you to deliver to 6 different schools that are all a half hour apart. So that's one of the pieces when you're looking at schools as a market. It depends. What type of storage facility they have, what type of kitchen facilities they have for processing and serving fresh foods, what kind of staffing they have, and what kind of expertise they have and ability to process foods. So these are all important things to be considering and have been challenges in the system, but certainly not something that's we're unable to overcome. So typically when I'm trying to explain kind of how school food works and what are the purchasing models, there's kind of 3 big buckets that procurement falls into typically in North Carolina. So typically the number one way that schools are sourcing local produce, but also just produce in general, of course, is their distributor. So understanding that those produce distributors, they're already serving school systems. Many of those are doing some local purchasing, but often the child nutrition director or the cafeterias don't know what local is coming through their existing distributor. So selling to that distributor is one model to sell to schools. Schools go through what's a bid process to identify and select which distributor they work with. And so asking about how that bid process works, they can vary on the time and length of the bid and the timing in any given year. We are fortunate to have the Ncba Farm to School program in this state. That's not something that every state has. So Ncba is a statewide farm to school program. It actually started as part of a DoD, Department of Defense program years ago, and is really an opportunity to source local product and distribute that on a statewide level. So for smaller farms in Western North Carolina, it's looking at volumes and procurement pieces on a statewide level. So that's really looking at larger scale farms that are able to serve across the state. And we are fortunate to have Michelle here with us today to talk a little bit more about the Ncba program. If you're interested in learning about how that works or how that system works and what does that look like in terms of how they decide which farms to purchase from or how that's distributed, we're going to have a discussion room as part of the grower buyer meeting if you have questions there. So the third procurement model is, of course, has multiple subsets, but that direct from the farm is what most people think about when they think about local purchasing, that direct from the farm to the cafeteria. So within that produce bid, there's restrictions on or commitments to purchase product through that local distributor. But there is some flexibility built into child nutrition school systems where they often have a micro purchase option that they have some flexibility to buy directly outside of that bid, directly from a farm, in addition to the purchasing they may do through that produce distributor. Now, most folks, when they hear micro purchase program, think, oh, well, that's really not enough to be impactful on any local purchasing. But again, that micro purchasing can look different on a lot of across school systems, but it can be $10,000 per farm per year. So while we call it micro purchasing, it is looking at giving school systems a nice option for some bulk direct purchasing, especially around a seasonal product that's coming in. Schools in North Carolina do require GAP certification for any farms that are selling directly to the school system. And the volume and distribution requirements for selling directly to that school are going to vary widely across the region. So of course, Buncombe County Schools is going to have the largest volume, the highest number of kids to feed. So looking at what may be a good match for your farm or product can vary across the community. So connecting and learning a little bit more about the different school systems across the region is helpful. So speaking of school systems, Allison Francis is with us today, and she is the Child Nutrition Director in Haywood County. Allison, I'd like to welcome you to just join in here for a few minutes and give us an overview of kind of your experience with local purchasing and what you've been able to make happen in Haywood County, and also some of the challenges you've run into.
Thank you, Molly. Excuse me. My name is Allison Francis, and I'm the School Nutrition Director for Haywood County Schools. I've worked in Haywood County for 13 years now. And when I first moved to Haywood County, I linked up with the ladies at ASAP, and they helped link me with the seasonal produce farm out of Canton, North Carolina. And that was the first time we bought direct from a farmer. And we purchased things like lettuce, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, right when school first started and those items were being produced and grown. We serve approximately 8,000 meals a day between breakfast, lunch, and after school snacks. We have 15 schools, and we also have a large central warehouse with a refrigerator, freezer, and dry storage area. And that has come in very handy for us when it comes to dealing with local farms. We also work with KT's orchard and apiary out of Canton, and we're able to have that produce brought to our warehouse. So it's kind of a one-stop for the farmer, and we break it down and deliver it out to the individual schools with the other products that we house in our warehouse. So not every school district has a central warehouse. And as Molly mentioned earlier, you might have to deliver to multiple schools, but some of the larger districts in Western North Carolina do have a central warehouse. I know Henderson County does, Buncombe County does. I'm not sure about further west than Haywood. We purchase produce through Marvin's Produce out of Greer, North Carolina, and they do have several local farms that they purchase through. We also participate in the North Carolina Farm to School program. And then again, we've been purchasing directly from KT's orchard and apiary out of Canton, getting fresh apples in the fall when school starts. And that has been a great connection for us that we made through ASAP, and we look forward to purchasing from them every year. One of the things that is different with school systems is that we have a set size on a lot of the whole produce that we purchase if we're going to serve something whole. So an apple or an orange, pears, things like that need to be a certain size and count per case so that we can assure that it meets the half cup requirement that we use to serve meals. I know KT had to go out and try to find a sorting mechanism to try to make sure that the apples she was providing to us met that size. And produce that we use to cut or chop or things like that don't really have to follow the same specifications. We could even take seconds on items that we're going to chop up and use in something. I know that some of the things that we've learned over the years is it's not always the perfect timing when someone might contact us about buying produce. We're usually 2 weeks out ordering wise with our large distributor. And if someone were to call us and say, oh, hey, I've got this load of potatoes or apples or cucumbers that I need to sell and I can give you a great deal, can you use them? While we would really love to have them, we've already placed an order for the same items in most cases. So we wouldn't be able to take them. But it's always something that we'd love to do if we have the opportunity. We do have set menus in most cases, but a lot of times fresh produce, I'm more than happy in my district to sub something out if I can get a local fresh product in. Gosh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of, can you think of anything else, Molly, that we've discussed that I haven't said? Your mute's on.
Yes, I took my own advice and muted, but it would be helpful to unmute too. Yeah, maybe just speaking a little bit. I know you had mentioned the kind of translating the product into a serving size is one of the challenges that you were able to kind of work through with KT. Are there other challenges or kind of lessons learned from kind of the direct purchasing end that may be helpful for folks that are considering this market?
Be flexible, as flexible as you can be. I know we do have a lot of restrictions, and one of the things that you mentioned earlier that is really helpful to us that is new in the last several years are those micro purchases. Some districts, their micro purchase threshold may only be 3,500. It depends on what their board approved procurement policy states, but I know in Haywood that's 10,000, and that can really go a long way for one particular product or with a farm. It has been difficult for us to find folks that are GAP certified. There really aren't that many locally. And we also require a $2 million liability insurance. So that's something else that can be a sticking point for some folks.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example and a good lead in is kind of thinking, again, it's got to be that right fit. And sometimes, I think the smaller diversified farms in our region aren't always fitting all those requirements, but certainly looking at opportunities for those that may be a good match. And typically those purchasing requirements are going to be similar to other large wholesale markets. So if you're selling to grocery stores or other large distributor or packing houses, you may also run into those same purchasing requirements. So that may be a good fit if you're diversifying within that particular market outlet. So if I want to make sure that we get through to the other speakers to share as well. So if you have questions for Allison, please put them on in the chat and we can circle back around. Or we are also glad that she's going to join us for the grower buyer meeting. So that may be another opportunity if you have very specific questions. But thank you, Allison. Let's see if I can. So yes, I think one of the things that I think, hearing from Allison's experience, that understanding the systems and what are the needs of the school system that you can that may or may not be a good match, understanding how that system is and how it works is real critical to determining not only if it's a good match, but navigating, setting yourself up for success in making those connections. I think the timing is a great example, that planning out your crops and your seasonality and having that conversation with potential buyers ahead of time, so they know that, oh, I'm able to, because of my elevation, I'm able to offer a longer season on tomatoes than another farm may be in the community, or what have you. So really starting that conversation early on will help kind of help avoid some of those time crunch issues, knowing that you may have potential excess at certain times of year or seconds that, typically at the end of the season, right before the frost, everyone's going to be harvesting their peppers at the end of the season before the frost. So while you don't necessarily know the volumes or price points there, you can have that conversation as a product that you may want to move in September. And I know that we've had some success with, marketing the idea of tie-dye peppers, those peppers that have half turned red and are still green on some, that may not be good for a wholesale market, that they don't fit neatly in the green or red pepper bucket, but maybe a great opportunity to add to the snack mix or to the line. So those are all important pieces to consider. So your child nutrition director is going to do purchasing for the whole school system. So it's not that every single school, it's not that cafeteria manager that you approach. If you want to sell to a particular school system, that central office, that central person identifying who's your child nutrition director, or some people may refer to it as a school nutrition director. They're going to be your first point of outreach. They may, depending on their staffing, they may say, you know who you need to talk to, but that's going to be your first reach out point, is contacting that. They're the one who's doing that menu planning and budgeting. Really understanding the needs of the purchasing requirements. If you come in and say, yeah, I'd love to sell to your school, but I'm not GAP certified and I don't have my insurance yet, and I'm not sure if I can deliver, can we make this work? You need to go in kind of understanding what their expectations and needs are, so that you can come and have that conversation. That it might be, I am working on my GAP certification and plan to have it for strawberries this year. Can we, what would that look like a few months down the road? So understanding those needs, even if you don't necessarily have a full delivery plan, having that conversation and know that distribution to a central warehouse or to multiple drop points is going to be part of that conversation. So doing a little bit of your homework for each particular school system to know what those needs are as you communicate. And then, of course, this is a challenge we hear from multiple buyers as well as farmers. So on both sides of the coin, that communications piece. As things change, you thought you were going to have X number of tomatoes coming in at the end of the month, but gosh, with the weather and the seasonality, or we had this hail, communicating as soon as you can about anticipated changes or problems to make sure that they can adapt or make shifts or changes as needed. Making sure to manage those expectations, being real clear and transparent about kind of what your expectations are and what theirs are, to make sure you're on the same page. So when you say a case of kale, they're expecting the same type of case with the same count or the same number of heads of lettuce in a particular case. So making sure that y'all are speaking the same language. When you're talking, it may be that you are talking about pounds of a product and the school is looking at cases for ordering. So making sure that that communication is you're talking the same language and you're understanding on the same page in terms of what the expectations are. And also thinking about promotions, to do the work to navigate these systems is something to promote for schools as well as farms. So if you can get your product in through a local distributor, how are we going to promote it in that cafeteria level? And really getting into the weeds of like, hey, there's these opportunities for those classroom, cafeteria, and community connections, or those cross-market opportunities for promotions. Let's make sure that if we can do all the work to get that local product on the line, that the kids know about it, that the families know about it, that the community knows about it. So making sure to promote even the small successes, even if the apple on the plate is the only local product, let's talk about that, because it's not always the default. And Allison did mention a little bit about timing. So thinking about what are the menu cyclings and how do we need to schedule ahead for ordering, both for your planning for sales and for production, but also for the menu cycling and ordering on the school end. So questions to ask yourself. Okay, are schools a good market outlet for my farm? Are we a good match? How can this complement other markets? Because it's not going to be based on seasonality and volume. This isn't going to be your only market outlet. You need to be thinking about how can this complement my other sales outlets to really diversify there. can we meet the purchasing requirements? Yeah, like maybe we can get that certification and the insurance, but can we, in our current capacity, can we really serve that volume consistently? Do we know the packing standards? Do we have our post-harvest practices down for the particular products that we're selling? So you want to set yourself up to succeed and set yourself up to have a successful relationship with your buyer. So making sure you're realistic about thinking about, can we meet these requirements? And then of course, having that conversation if there's particular pieces in there that may be a challenge. And also thinking about what model is going to work best for you. It may be direct to the schools is how you envision this happening, but maybe with all that you've got going on, trying to facilitate that delivery, working within the micro purchasing program is a lot to navigate, but maybe you can get that product in through a local distributor. So thinking about, just because that direct purchase model may or may not work this season, what are other options or models for getting that product in? And then again, as I talked about, how can I feature my product through this system? And how can I tell the story of my farm and really celebrate that connection to local farms and community? And then of course, when you go talk to the buyer, you need to make sure you have a list of questions to be able to really assess, is this going to work for you? You know, how does their bid process work? What is your current distributor? What local seasonal products are you interested in? It may be that you have a perception of what's served in that school lunch menu, and the buyer may be more creative in thinking about what could that plate look like. It could also be the opposite, that surely they could be serving, corn on the cob. It's great to be coming in, but do they have the capacity and the staffing to shuck corn? And can they cut it into the right serving size to be able to feature that? So understanding, and again, being on the same page about what products may be a good fit for that market. What volume do you need? How frequently would you need me to deliver? Some folks may have really good storage facilities and you wouldn't have to deliver as frequently. Others may be limited and you'd have to deliver once a week, twice a week, really understanding kind of what those needs are. What are the options for micro purchasing? It's a good question because it's different for every school system. And then, do you participate in the USDA Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program? What other program opportunities might be to get creative on how to get product in? So a few of the things that you may want to consider asking if you really reach out and connect with the buyer. All right, I'm going to take a breath here as we shift to thinking about preschool. So, we've talked a lot about farm to school and K-12 models, and they're, their own animal with very specific pieces to consider. So as Allison had mentioned, we don't have a large number of farms in the region that have the volumes and certifications and all the requirements to be able to really effectively access that market opportunities. So it's not a good fit. But I would say for the majority of farms in our region, that isn't necessarily a good fit. Now, farm to preschool is a very different model. Another opportunity to sell and connect with the community, but is going to be offering a little bit more flexibility in those purchasing, both in the requirements, but also what kind of volumes, what kind of products then they incorporate, how frequently they need to be provided. Depending on the preschool or the early childhood nutrition program, they may operate year round. There may be opportunities to connect directly with the community and promote your product on multiple levels. There's also some opportunities to have some direct connections with that educational experience. Are you interested in diversifying your farm into agritourism and welcoming school groups to the farm? Are you interested in available to go into the classroom to do activities or to promote your product, encourage people to do a taste test with blueberries with preschoolers and, send home information about how those families can connect with your farm as well. So it's a very different market outlet than the K-12 school system, different opportunities, but of course there's also different challenges. One of the, while you have got, smaller diversified options for purchasing, you've also got, small volumes highly variable, just similar to restaurants. It may be that they need, one case of tomatoes a week, and other centers that maybe have multiple locations might be able to purchase 5 cases of tomatoes a week. So it's a highly variable market, depending if you're looking at family childcare homes or centers with multiple locations. But typically it's going to be smaller purchasing volumes and more frequent deliveries. They are often a lower price point that they can pay than restaurants. So you have to think creatively, like you may not have a lot of restaurant options in your community, but is there options to make sure that those numbers are working to make that outlet work for your farm operation? Again, it might be an opportunity to look at moving products that you have in surplus or that are second. So again, a way to diversify your market outlets and sales strategy. Often early childhood programs are limited on staffing, storage, equipment, and the facilities they have available for food prep can vary wildly. So, you'll hear today from the YWCA that has staff with culinary experience, who has a kitchen to be able to do prep work and is excited and open to the idea of incorporating different local products and featuring that, but also has the skills and facility and staff time to be able to do that. So understanding what some of those limitations are. Other folks might just have, a microwave to heat up meals, and kind of understanding the breadth and of opportunities, but also challenges. And distribution as well. Very few childcare facilities have kind of that central warehouse model. So it would typically be multiple distribution points if you wanted to serve that market opportunity. In addition, similar to K-12 systems, procurement models, you'll have a few different ways that farm to preschool programs make procurement work. So similar to the K-12, you're going to have a produce distributor, or sometimes it won't even be specific to produce. It'll be a food service distributor that they can purchase from on a regular basis. Depending on the scale and size, some childcare facilities will shop at a grocery for their food programs, or they may use groceries to supplement their regular purchasing. And then within that direct to farm purchasing, there's a lot more flexibility on how to make that work. Some are purchasing direct from the farm and set up orders and deliveries on a regular basis. Other folks have the opportunity to go to a farmer's market to pick up product from farms there. There's been success in working with farmer collaboratives or aggregators of product to purchase local. And some folks are getting creative in the CSA model. And how can we, have that, weekly box of produce or product that we can plan to incorporate over the course of the year. And then cooperative purchasing models where you're aggregating the buyer end is another angle. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So again, this is kind of teasing out what we mean within these different purchasing models. So again, this is going to vary widely on the location, the staffing, that capacity on the childcare level. So it may be that you have a farm stand right down the road that you are already driving by every day, and it would be convenient to go and pick up, local product to incorporate into the school meals or snack that day. And others, may not be able to leave the classroom to go to a farmer's market or a farm stand when they're open. So looking at kind of, this is a much more adaptable model, and really working with that individual buyer to say, what is going to work? Is it, is it some sort of pre-purchase piece that they can, have a planned box of and just incorporate it in whatever's coming in seasonal? Or is there some bulk purchasing that they could, even though they're small volume, they work with other childcare sites or other community groups or organizations to really pool it so that it's a bigger bang for your buck, that the the farmer can offer higher volumes at more of a wholesale price if they're not, if they can pool some of that purchasing power in the community. So there are lots of different ways that people are making these work. But there's also the option to request local through a distributor. It's also an option to look at what local is already in the grocery stores and how can we feature that in our meal programs. So that's another option that folks have made work. So I'd like to invite Melinda to join us with the YWCA of Asheville and share a little bit about your program and what you've been able to make happen recently.
Sure. Hi, my name is Melinda Aponte. I'm the nutrition specialist for the YWCA's early learning program and all of the other programs in the YWCA. The nutrition program at the Y serves 50,000 meals to 600 children annually. As you can see, between two separate child care programs, we have the ELP program, which is the early learning program, and the empowerment child care program, which qualifies for low-income families. So I had the opportunity to get partnered and paired with Ivory Creek Farms through David and the Farm Feeding Families program. And as Molly stated earlier, I'm the unicorn in this equation because I do have the staff. I don't necessarily have the space, but I do have the staff with the background that's able to, use fresh produce. Another thing with the YWCA, we have so many different programs that target low-income families. So I use this opportunity to use the extra and give it to the participants in the other programs. So I have a lot of more flexibility than schools, and I have a lot of more opportunities to get bigger bulk orders. And the success with me and the farmer that I was paired with is communication. Our communication is great. I know when she's low on things. I know if she's not going to really be able to give me the product that I need. I know exactly the amount that so we do it in cases. So we're very clear on what I need, what I can use. And also if, for example, she had a bulk of peppers and I just didn't need those, but we communicated and then I got some and I gave it to other programs in the building. So communication is key, and just keeping that open. But childcare programs, I feel a little bit more flexible. My budget is from CACFP, so I have that flexibility to purchase a little bit more than schools. My menu is weekly and I have the opportunity to change or add things on. So again, I have a lot more flexibility in where I work and what I do with purchasing, with changing my menu up, and also my budget. So that's something to consider. Not all childcare facilities, but a lot of them kind of have that little flexibility, especially if they have CACFP. As long as we hit all those markers, we can spend the money on the food that the children are going to consume. So, yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, and I think you're a great example of the unicorn that you make it sound so easy.
Yeah.
But maybe, do you have some perspective or thoughts on challenges for other systems, other schools that may not?
Yeah, I think
it seems like you're much more creative in using fresh products than some other childcare facilities. So I don't know if you want to speak to some of the other challenges that other schools may have that you.
I think the main challenge that other schools and other facilities is space, and also just not having enough people. I think what would be a great selling point for some schools and other facilities is if the vegetables can be pre-washed, pre-cut, if that's something that the farm can do, and if that's in your capability. I think that would help a lot of different centers and schools, and it'll cut the middleman out of having to have that one employee that's just sitting there chopping greens. And so I think if farmers are able to kind of prepackaged vegetables for schools or for certain centers. I think that would be a really big help for certain organizations, especially with the lack of employees that a lot of us have. So.
And I guess one last question for you specifically, because I know you've worked some magic in introducing some products that probably many children have never tried before. So how do you manage with that expectation of, you said we can work with a variety of products as long as kids will consume it. So how do you introduce some new foods that adults would assume that children wouldn't be receptive to?
Yeah, well, all my kiddos, they eat everything, but my main thing is I use the opportunity to, with all the fruits and vegetables that I do receive from the farms, to have my own farmers market. So I'll go to the classrooms and I'll introduce it to the children in its natural state and ask them, what do you think it tastes like? And so I use it as an educational tool as well. And then they get really excited. And then I'm like, well, it's going to be in your lunch. And so using that opportunity to kind of put the education and bring in good, healthy habits with food. And the more you, the more you speak with the kids, the more they get to see it and touch it and smell it. And it's not this foreign thing. They're way more receptive to eating it. So that's how I do it.
Well, and that's a great tribute to those opportunities for the classroom community and cafeteria connections there. And I think that's definitely unique with, a child nutrition director with a school system of thousands of kids may not have that opportunity, but a unique opportunity within the childcare setting to really use that as a teaching tool. So thanks for sharing that.
Sure. And just one other thing, like the YWCA, we have so many different programs. And I think that if you're looking for a childcare program to kind of get to sell your vegetables to, maybe look for organizations that have different programs in it, because I use this opportunity to give to Mother Love and to give to other programs and people that are low income. And that could be something that would be beneficial to the farmers too, just to have that opportunity to branch out into different programs, not necessarily only programs that are cooking it there in-house. So. That's it.
Thank you. That's a great example. All right. Well, I'd like to jump to another fun and different example. So thinking about welcoming Jeannie Gunn from Werner to join us and share her experience.
Well, Melinda and I are sort of related in that Werner is also a unicorn. I walked in to my job in 2013, and the Rainbow in My Tummy program was already existing. I walked into a healthy food culture, much like what Melinda has just described. We already have a culture of kids trying new things, and that's just part of what Melinda's described our classroom teachers do as well. What do you think it's going to taste like? Here's something new. We have an educational garden behind North Carolina Outward Bound School, which is a very short walk away for our kids, and they can go and pick things for the summer, when things are being picked, and bring them to the kitchen door, and we'll wash them up, and if necessary, cook them and add it to their lunch, so they immediately get to try what they've harvested. So those are some of our successes are just our food culture in general. We are feeding 225 a day at lunchtime. It's a little bit less for breakfast and snack because we feed our administrative staff lunch. We're the early Head Start provider, which is an income-based program, as most of you probably know. But Werner East, our Riceville location, also has a lot of private pay families. So I don't get that full 366 for every child in my program. Those are only for the children that qualify for free lunch. But we have two other centers, one in Candler, far west Asheville, and one in Emma, near West Asheville. And we cook out of a central kitchen for those centers as well. Some of my other successes are because of our private pay families. local sells really well to our parents. You know, we love bringing a family in, an expectant family sometimes in, and being able to talk about Rainbow in My Tummy, talk about use of local product. It makes Verner very attractive. Not that we need to be particularly attractive in this market, because unfortunately, Asheville is in great need of more spots for parents to send their kids for early enrichment and use those centers sometimes as daycare. But just like the YWCA, we do have a lot of flexibility in our menu changes. You know, if somebody called me and says, you know, I'm covered up in basil, I would say, yes, bring me 4 pounds, and I would change my menu, and we would have basil pesto pasta because we have fresh basil coming to our door. Those kinds of things would be thrilling for us, actually, because we do have a lot of flexibility. We don't have to have the forecasting that local school systems do very often, particularly the large ones. So those are our successes. Some of my challenges have been that even though I've been in the local food guide as a buyer for, well, 8 years, no farm has ever called me to say, I have a lot of basil. Can you use it? I have a lot of green beans. Can you use them? Some of our other challenges are that we do have very limited space. I do have a skilled staff, but I can't fabricate meats. I don't have space to wash 3 cases of kale. I need, you know, some things to be prepped, like salad greens need to be washed in advance. But some things, you know, we certainly can do. You know, we can cut broccoli, we can cut cauliflower. It just all depends on, you know, what the rest of the menu is in terms of that very flexibility. So.
Well, thank you for sharing. And yes, I think that's a great point that I think, you know, part of the reason we wanted to have this workshop today is think about to make sure we're challenging some assumptions people may have about selling to preschools that farmers may overlook a childcare center as, oh, that's not going to be a good market for me. I can't move product, or that's not going to be a good fit for me. So it's understanding a little bit more of what some of those opportunities are, so that folks are reaching out and looking at it, at those folks right there in their community that they may be able to serve. So thank you for sharing that example. So again, similar to K-12, you need to understand the system. What are the needs? What's the capacity? What's the interest? There's going to be a wide variety. I think both Melinda and Jeannie are the unicorns that we aspire to have in our community. We want folks that are thinking creatively about and have those kids that are already engaged in that healthy food environment that are willing to eat it. So knowing that you won't start with every at that place with every center, but there is that potential. And again, there's something to aspire to, and we know it can happen in the community. So wanting to support that, but working within those limited budgets, but with flexibility for purchasing and a preference for local purchasing that they can bring in through that CACFP program. As with schools, communications are critical, and knowing kind of what the expectations are, what they can expect, and where they need to fill in gaps is going to be critical to that system. So questions to ask farmers if they're looking at preschools or early childhood as a potential market. You know, how can this complement? Again, this alone is not going to be your only market outlet. How can your surplus or your product mix or your diversification plan include these market opportunities, even if it's not your primary or most lucrative market? How to use that to diversify? Can I be consistent? You know, they need to make a plan and have some adaptability and flexibility, but that consistent communication to make sure folks are on the same page is, of course, very critical. Determining what models work best. Lots of different options, but still, you got to figure out how to make that work and be in conversation, part of that with the particular buyer. So, you know, again, that much more opportunity to feature that product both in the education programs or with the community connections. But you need to be asking, you know, what is your capacity? Do you need the salad mix? Do you need salad mix that's pre-washed, or can you handle head lettuce? You know, what kind of volumes do you need? How many locations? Am I going to have to deliver to all three, or is there already a system in place? So thinking about through these questions that, you know, that you really want to be able to have that conversation with about much more flexibility for this market, but that need for communications and having it be a partnership and a conversation is so critical. And at the end of the day, I think we can talk about requirements all day and what, you know, challenges and opportunities to make this happen. At the end of the day, the programs that we've seen the most success with are, you need to make sure that one person that is in charge of that decision making is willing to partner with you. At the end of the day, that person is connecting with them and connecting with filling their needs and making this happen, them seeing the benefit of that local purchasing, having that advocate in and partnership relationship with your buyer and with those schools is going to be the biggest make it or break it on whether this opportunity works in your community. So ASAP has a plethora of resources, and we can certainly work with you to kind of figure out what those particular questions are. Of course, as predicted, we're going to be running short on time, but I think that whether you're a farmer looking to sell to schools, whether you're child nutrition wanting to connect more with more schools, or whether you're, you know, again, trying to make those community connections, we have a lot of good resources for each of those audiences and are certainly happy. Our staff is willing to help you, either direct you to where you can find resources on those websites, but also answer questions that are specific to you and your operation. And we hope that the grower buyer meeting today is another opportunity to connect. If you aren't able to connect with or meet with the buyer you'd like to today, or if you're a buyer and you didn't connect with the farm that's a good fit for you today, we're happy to work with you to make some of those individual connections based on your location, what you're interested in. So each of the buyers that are participating today filled out a survey about, you know, what are their purchasing needs and interests, as well as requirements, so that our staff can help better and facilitate those connections that may be able to support more of this happening in the community. I'm going to jump ahead here. Before I hand this over to David, who's going to talk a little bit and kind of segue into how the grower buyer meeting is going to work, I really encourage and ask that each of you fill out an evaluation for this workshop today. You know, it's a little bit, these virtual workshops, it's a little bit hard to make sure we're getting the feedback we need to know what was helpful, what wasn't, what is it that we ran out of time and we never got to answer what question, what's going to be most helpful for continued resources and support. So David will be putting a link to the survey in the chat box. We also have this funny and impressive QR code that for those of you who know how to navigate that system, we are trying to incentivize, sweeten the deal a little bit. We want your input. So there's an opportunity on the survey if you'd like to be included in a drawing for a gift card. We'd like to offer that as well as a little incentive. So please take a few minutes, either now or after the grower buyer meeting, to complete this survey. It's really helpful to get that type of feedback from y'all. So David, without further ado, do you want to kind of introduce the grower buyer meeting and how does this work in a virtual format?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. I know quite a few of you. I'm David Smiley, ASAP's local food campaign program manager. So directly following this workshop, essentially starting in 5 minutes. Our first meeting will be at 4:45 formally, will be our virtual grower bar meeting. And for those farms and school systems who are participating, or farms who are interested in participating, this is an invaluable opportunity to virtually meet face-to-face with some school systems that are represented here today. So school system, ECEs, preschools as well. So this is an opportunity for you to discuss what a potential sourcing relationship might look like, what products they need, delivery, frequencies, certifications, insurance, etc. And if it seems like a good fit, to follow up later to explore that relationship. This doesn't have to be a formal conversation whatsoever. We really stress it's informal, and you don't have to be looking to directly start selling to these school systems right away. This is a chance for you to have that conversation and learn about what a relationship with that buyer will look like. So we did do a little bit of pre-scheduling for these virtual grower buyer meetings. So sometimes slots will be taken up. However, there are still plenty of time slots remaining. So if you are interested in speaking with some of the buyers who will be there today, and they're listed here at the bottom: Buncombe County Schools, Creative Beginnings of Lenore; Haywood County Schools, Making Program for Progress; Verner Center for Early Learning, and I think we'll also be joined by the YWCA as well as NCDA. Please do drop in, and if a time slot is taken, just hang out. I can play matchmaker and help facilitate those connections so that you can meet with a school system or EC who is a good fit for your farm or a good educational opportunity for your farm. So I just dropped the Zoom link into the chat box, so it will be in a separate Zoom room just to keep things a little bit clean, and it'll just start in a few minutes. And again, those Zoom meetings will be about 15 minutes in length with each buyer, and I'll facilitate that round of grower buyer connections. I think that's it, Molly. Nope, we got you on